Thank you guys so much for coming out. We appreciate it. My name is Joshua Inglis.
And I'm Juan Inglis, and we're with One Builders.
So today we're going to be talking about ground up construction from A to Z, whether you're working with a builder or you're looking to do the project on your own and hire all the subs. So let's get started.
All right, so the first step you want to do, and some of you may have already done this, is you want to find your ideal lot. So you want to find the location where you're going to build it, and then get that picked out. Because you can have an architect design a house for you, and then you have to. So there's another way to do it too, but then you'll have to have the house fit the lot because of the variations and zoning and all that stuff. So the house will have to fit on the lot. So ideally find the lot that you want, and then from there you can design the house that you want.
Now, something to consider when you're looking at the lot is what are the setbacks of the property to the left and to the right. Many times in the city of Chicago, you have houses that are way set back, all the way back towards the alley. And when you have that and you're trying to build a regular house, you'll need to get a variance from the city, and this is a very lengthy process. So it's very important to look at what are the houses, two houses to the left, two houses in the right. Most cities are going to want some sort of consistency on the setbacks, and if you don't have that, even though your house may have a normal setback, the city may require you to get a variance. So these are important things, and you may get a really good deal on lots sometimes that are not in ideal locations, like if it's next to a busy street, close to a train track. You know, ideally, these are going to affect your resale value. You may build the most beautiful house in the world, but when you go to sell it down the line 10, 20, 30 years later, you're going to have trouble selling that. So there's lots of things to consider when you're looking at a lot.
So once you've got your lot picked out, obviously you want to get a survey, and then that survey will help the architect and the engineer able to design everything that's needed for the house, the layout, the setbacks, and all that stuff. So you want to make sure your architect checks for the setbacks and that your engineer checks for the setbacks. We had a client that hired us just for the construction. We weren't involved in the planning phase. They just hired us for that. And as it went to the city for approval, the architect and the engineer both missed the setbacks, and the homeowner had to go back with a whole new set of plans because that particular house would not, the city would not allow it to be built on that lot because of the setbacks. It was a corner lot, so it literally, even though this was in Wheaton, you couldn't build a nice big house. You had to actually, he had to do a skinnier house than he intended, so it was much narrower and deeper. So just things to be aware of when you're doing that. So make sure your architect and your engineers are looking at the setbacks.
And the survey you're going to get, again, is not a normal survey. Obviously, your architect, they should know the right type of survey to get. Again, you need the setbacks, two houses to the left, two houses to the right. You get the normal survey that you get when you buy a house at a normal real estate transaction. That will not work. So especially if you're buying a house, maybe there's a house already located on the home.
LOL down.
Don't just get the normal survey. If you're buying a property with the house on it, make sure that you communicate with that, so that way you might even have the seller contribute to the cost of that survey.
All right, so now you're getting your process going, and you're going to have to send letters to the adjacent neighbors to notify them of what's going to be happening. Whether it's demoing an existing house, building, and that kind of thing. So each village and city requires the requirements are different. So you have to go to the building department and find out what kind of letter you need to send. In the city of Chicago, you also need to send a letter to the alderman, and they can supposedly use it for training fires. The fire department can use it to go in and do stuff since you're going to be demoing the house. So they can use it for training. We haven't seen them actually do that, but things to be aware of. So
with that too, when that's a requirement to obviously send the letters, but we like to let the community know as well because there are going to be large trucks coming in and out of any given neighborhood, and of course safety is important, just so families are aware if they have small children that large trucks are coming through the neighborhood. So just as a general rule of thumb, whether the city requires it or not, you should be doing it.
And then what you want to do is once you have you finalize your architectural prints and you have all that, what you want to do then is get bids. So go out and get bids from electricians, plumbers, framers. So when you submit those plans to the city and as it's going through the approval process, they're going to want a list of the contractors that you're going to use to do the job. So they want the electrician, they want the mechanical or heating and ventilation contractor, plumber, roofer, siding, so it all depends on village and city. Chicago will have you put the concrete. So there's two different masonry contractors in the city of Chicago that they have to be licensed. There's the concrete masonry, and then there's the brick masonry and stonework. So if you're going to do a brick house, then you have to add a masonry contractor that's licensed to do bricks and stones. So so that's just it's kind of a list. Some villages and cities require less, some more. So that's just kind of a basic there. So, and then your builder, if you do end up hiring a builder, obviously he'll probably have all these subcontractors or specialty contractors, but they're listed out as a general contractor. And so that's pretty much a lot of the things that contractors that you'll need. And so you'll want to get a contract signed with them, and at times you'll need a letter of intent. Not for every one of them, but for some of them, the city will require you to have a letter of intent.
You're going to want to set up a utility account because what you're going to be doing is removing electricity, removing the actual water that's coming to the property if you're demoing it. So you actually need to set up an account before you can actually remove the utilities. And again, this is something you want to do early on in the process because we've encountered times where we've talked to homeowners and it's taken them over 2 years to build a house. It's because they're not contacting ComEd in advance, far enough in advance that ComEd might be behind to deactivate and disconnect your service. And that has to be done before the house can be demoed.
Yeah, and sometimes what you'll run into with utilities, especially if you're doing this like towards in the winter months, and we actually ran into this where ComEd was supposed to come and connect the electricity at a house, and that big storm that came in November hit right on the week that they were going to come and hook up the electric at a job site. Well, they said, too bad, we're coming in 2 weeks now because how many people lost power, so their focus then became getting everyone connected with electricity. So sometimes the weather will affect that timeline, so you want to try to get all that set up as quick as possible because it usually takes them 2 to 4 weeks to, once you approve it, for them to disconnect, for them to come out.
So once you have all these things in place, you're going to apply for the demo permit, and what's really important when you're demoing a house is you need to install a fence around the perimeter. Again, safety is very important. You don't want kids getting onto the job site, so you need to have a secure job site with fencing.
Yeah, and some places will require it before they'll issue the demo permit. They will actually come, like Wheaton, they'll come out and inspect to make sure that you have a fence up, and then so they won't approve the demo permit until that's in place. So again, Chicago, they don't look at that. And then once you get your demo permit approved, at that point they can approve your construction permit. You can have both of them submitted at the same time, but they will not issue the construction until the demo permit has been issued. I think that's pretty universal that we've seen with all the villages and cities.
So to me, this is, if you're thinking with your pocketbooks, which I think all of you should, this is the most important slide. You want to make as many selections up front as possible. The less things you make up front, you're going to open yourself up to change orders. So this is where working with a design build firm. If you're doing this on your own, you're not working with a builder, I recommend working with at least a designer that can help you put these things together. Because otherwise, what we see many time and time again is once these change during the process and the house is at a certain level of construction, it's not as easy to change out something once it's ordered or it wasn't done at the right time. So that is why it is, to me, the most vitally important to have as many selections chosen before construction ever begins. And that's from windows to siding. So I'll give you an example. The big, if you're looking for a house with a great resale value right now, the style house you want to build is a farmhouse style home. And farmhouses are white homes with, a lot of them have white windows and black windows. The ones with the black windows sell for a lot more money. Now, once the windows are ordered and delivered and they're white windows, to get black windows, most suppliers will probably charge you a restocking fee, and now it's more expensive, you waste more time, your timeline is extended. So making those decisions up front is crucial to avoid change order.
Yeah, and like a window order takes anywhere from 2 weeks to 2 months, depending, on what kind of windows you order. So a couple things that happen, the reason for selecting them right away, even though they're down at the bottom. So you have plumbing, you have lighting, and those are vital because that actually happens. You need to know that way ahead of time, and you'll see because the plumbing starts at the rough-in phase. So you have to have your plumbing fixtures picked out, especially for the showers and the tubs, because those go in at the rough-in phase. So if you haven't picked that, then that's going to cause delays. Same thing with the lighting. Do you want a sconce light for the master bathrooms where they're just wall mounted, or you want an above light? The fan, you want a fancy ventilation fan. So those are things that the more you select up front, the less likelihood you'll have of any changes or that kind of thing. Because this stuff will creep up and just all of a sudden you're like, oh, I got time to do this because we're not going to do this, and all of a sudden, bam, you're hit and you have to, you're scrambling to pick your plumbing or your electrical, what you're going to do for the design.
So clearing the lot is not just a house if the house is there. We'll show you a picture next, but you also have to think of the trees on the property. We'll show you one where we knocked down one house and we built 2 houses where it was located. But just the amount of trees that this property had was an additional $17,000, and you'll see why. The amount of trees that you have to clear out before you can build a home. So it's not just the cost of demoing the house, and that typically is going to be a different contractor or subcontractor than the person that tears down the house.
Yes, and then once the lot's cleared, and sometimes you may have to actually remove the trees before you can even get the demo permit if the city or village requires you to put a fence up. So, if the trees are overgrown and you can't put up a construction fence, then you're going to have to cut the trees down. So, but this is normally, if it's a normal lot that is not overgrown, this would be the order. So then you're going to strip the topsoil, stockpile, and then before excavation starts, you want the engineer or survey company to come back out and stake the lot of where the excavator is going to dig down, because they have to go on the actual, where it's showing on the paperwork. And then you go ahead and excavate, and then from there, you do foundations and footings. So each one of those is going to require inspection. So for the foundation and footing, so you have an inspection, they put the forms down, and then you do what they call a pre-pour inspection. They come in and check, okay, they got all the rebar and all that stuff in there. And then another inspection after you pour the walls and that kind of thing. So each village and city is different. They may require less inspections, more inspections. So just be aware of that. But here's a house that we did. So this was the lot. It was, when you looked on Google Maps, it was in the city of Chicago. There's not a lot of empty areas in certain parts of Chicago. So you saw this nice, all these houses, and then it was like this double lot with trees. It looked like a little park or a forest preserve in the middle, and And I think it still shows that way on Google, but it's kind of interesting. But one of the things that was always happening here is with the neighbors is whenever there was a storm, it would knock the power out for the whole neighborhood. So when we came in and cleared the lots, one of the neighbors that was 2 or 3 doors down came up to me and she's like, I was dancing in the streets because now we're not going to lose power anymore. She was so happy because it was overgrown. But this added a huge expense to the budget, you know, because it was just so overgrown.
Yeah, and what was very interesting, even some of another one of the neighbors told me that people would actually camp out in this in the yard of this home in the city of Chicago. So this is a picture of the backyard again. Here's a picture with once just the trees are cleared. I mean, this is before we got here to clean up, but you can see all the trash and things. This was after just the tree contractor came in to chop down all the trees. I forgot to include a picture of the tree that was the tree trunk and how huge some of those tree trunks were.
So there, now we've demoed the house. The house was right in this area here. So we've demoed the house and getting that ready for excavation.
There you can see the footings for one of the foundations.
So once you've got everything in place, as far as the footing, foundations, the walls, your next step is going to be underground plumbing. And potentially you could do the water service at that time. That's separate from the underground, and that's going to require an inspection. So if you're doing construction in Chicago, Chicago actually requires by code that all downspouts go into the sewer. So Chicago still has the combined storm and waste sewer is still combined. So all that goes in there. But they require, because the lots are so small, there's not a lot of land area. So you actually run cast iron pipes underground, and this is when you would do it for the underground inspection on the outside, and they tie into the whole sewer system. And then there is the inspection for that as well. And then you can pour your slab at that time. So once you pass the inspection, you put the gravel down. And you can pour your slab. You can put it, if you're going to do radiant heat, you at that time do it and then pour the slab. So
there you can see where we've got 2 pits. One of the pits is for your overhead sewer system. The other pit is for the rainwater. And on the edges, Juan, if you want to point that out, you can see that's dimple board. So what that does is any moisture in basements is what obviously causes mold. So what the dimple board does is it takes any moisture along the foundation and it channels that water into the sump pump, and then to get that water out of the foundation. So if you've ever looking to finish a basement and you don't have a sump pump, I want to say I've seen it time and time again where you go into a basement and after just a couple years you begin to see mold. And that's because there's moisture along the foundation. So if you're ever looking to finish a basement, it's well worth the investment of doing a sump pump. Otherwise, you're going to get that moisture in your basement, and then you're going to have to rip it out and redo it. So always do the dimple board. Feed that into the sump pump.
And if you want kind of what this is similar to, this is the way we do them. It's called a French drain. So, you know, if you have an older house that doesn't have the drain tile and the sump pump, you can hire companies that will come in and they'll cut, you know, like 3 feet out, and then they put in a French drain system. So if there's, especially with these older houses, you'll get cracks and stuff in the foundation. So if it leaks through, it typically doesn't squirt out, it just runs down the wall. So the French drain creates like a 1/4 inch space between the plastic part of the drain tile, and so it just goes right into the drain tile. So this is similar to, this is what we typically do and a lot of builders do in Chicago.
Then you start the framing for the house. And the framing, obviously you're going to start with the walls, and then you work each level up, and then obviously you get to the roof. Once you have the roof on, then you want to start getting the property watertight as quickly as possible. Again, I've seen it where a house is built and there's delays in the house being built, and then years later the owners have mold issues. It's because they didn't get that property watertight as quickly as possible. It's very important, so that way you don't have water that's behind the wall.
So you want to have your roofer literally scheduled to come in and put in the roof the day after the framing contractors finish putting up the roof sheathing. So, and typically your framer, when they do give a quote, they will include the install of the windows. So that's part of the framing phase. And one little tip I'll give on this is so one of the ways that water always gets in the houses is through when people don't do the flashing right with the siding and that kind of thing, and even through the windows, because water always somehow finds its way behind there. Even with when you follow it, there's a tendency for water to get in there. So, but one of the things we do with our window, when we do you put on the windowsill, you actually do a beveled cedar siding on the bottom of the windowsill before putting in the window. And then you do tape on the bottom, so and it's a very specific tape. So if any water ever gets behind the window, it's beveled away from the house and goes out. So it's kind of it's one way to do a windowsill. There's many different ways, but what you're trying to do is keeping the water out of because the water gets in there and you don't know it, and there'll be a whole wall will be rotting because water was getting in there and you couldn't tell.
That's Juan with one of the lead carpenters on the job. This is the framing up, the roof up, windows in. Then we're going to do the HVAC. You can also do the plumbing, the waste lines, because pitches are important in waste lines. So depends on the house, but sometimes you may do HVAC first, sometimes you may do the waste lines first. Just depends on how much room you have, but pitching on the waste lines is very important. So many times we have the plumber come in, do the waste lines, then we have the HVAC contractor come in, and then we have the plumber come back and do the supply lines, because pitches is important.
Yeah, so here you have the HVAC rough. So at the plumbing, again, we're installing shower valves, you're installing tubs, and even if you have a freestanding tub that you may be putting in a master suite, you want it at the job site at that time, because and then you'll remove it once the plumber's done. So he may need it for placement of where the valves are going to go if you're going to do a freestanding filler for the tub. Again, you need all that there, and then it gets moved off the job site so it doesn't get damaged until the final what we call the plumbing trim is installed. So that's why these selections, like we talked about, are important, because that happens pretty quick here. This is probably about a month into the job, depending on weather delays and inspections and that kind of thing. And then the electrical roughing, if you want 6-inch cans, 4-inch cans, no cans, where you want the, what style lights you want, how many lights you want, those things are. So again, selections are important because it's not just at the very end for stuff at the end, but it's during the construction process. And here you can see some of the plumbing, the waste lines, the supply lines. We got electrical, waste, and this is the plumbing stack here. So you've already got your roof on, but the plumber needs to go through and put the stack through the roof. That's okay. So one of the things we recommend is don't pay your roofer the full amount yet. You can pay him probably 90%, 85% of the contract, because then you want him to come back and flash for the plumbing stack that goes through the roof, for the HVAC if you're doing high efficiency and you're running your intakes and exhausts for your furnaces, and that's going through the roof, then you want them to flash all those things, and then the bathroom fans, so there's a lot of things they need to come back and flash. So never pay your roofer the full amount due once they put the roofing on after it's been installed.
After that, we would do a sprinkler system. A lot of cities in the Chicagoland area require sprinkler systems, like Glen Ellen, even Matson, of all places, requires sprinklers. there's many areas that are going to require a sprinkler system. In Chicago, if it's residential, sprinklers aren't required unless you have a rooftop deck. If you have a rooftop deck, immediately the city is going to either require you to do an exterior staircase, which goes up to the rooftop deck, or a sprinkler system. I always recommend a sprinkler system because an exterior staircase that leads up to the rooftop deck is the #1 place that people get break-ins. So just for safety purposes, if you're going to live somewhere, no one can see somebody on your roof in the middle of the night, and it's very easy for a lot of people to go on these exterior staircases. It's worth a little extra money to put the sprinkler system, and you get a discount on your insurance. Long term, it's a much better investment and a lot safer for you and your family.
And we're just seeing it's probably going to be pretty much universal here in the future, where everyone's going to require sprinkler systems. So calculate that into your budget. Find out from the building department. Wheaton doesn't require it. Glen Ellen does. They're right next to each other. And then from there, you're going to do. Once you've got everything installed, go ahead and do your siding, your brick, your stucco, your stone, and then do the porch or deck that you may want to be putting into the house. So some people do it a little different. Some will wait until the drywall's up. Some will wait, or do it right away. We recommend to do it right away because now you have a house that's a lot more watertight. Even though a house is wrapped, once you close it up, once you've got the drywall and insulation in there, if water gets in back there, you may not see it. Now you've got water kind of just sitting there and potentially causing a mold issue down the road.
Yeah, and we didn't have it in the slide, but after the sprinkler system, you're going to have your low voltage people. These are the people that are doing your speaker wire, your Cat 6. Everything is wireless today, but it's a lot quicker when you actually have Cat 6 cabling in the home. And you're going to have a much better experience with your technology with wired. And with the Cat 6 cabling, there doesn't need to be any conduit like electrical typically does. So that's why they can come in anytime. But we recommend right after the sprinkler system. Here's just an example. We've got, this is one of the, we've got the foam there with sprinkler, and then an example of those two homes.
Yeah, so we got the house closed up there before, so you got the porch, you've got the siding up. All right, so you're gonna have, depending on the village or city, you're gonna have a fire stop inspection. And that usually is actually with the rough framing inspection. They'll do it at the same time. And so what that is essentially you're trying to eliminate any place that air can travel to, if a fire starts somewhere inside the joist, they want to prevent any oxygen from getting there, because without oxygen the fire can't spread. So that's the reason for that. And the level of fire stop you have to do will vary from village to village and city to city. So. Another thing too with the inspections, like in the city of Chicago, you do each inspection individually. In other villages, they may have you do them all together. So for example, I know we keep referring to these ones, but gives you kind of the opposites. In Wheaton, you do the framing, fire stop, electrical, and mechanical all at the same time. So even though you finish the framing way ahead, you can't order that inspection until all that other stuff. And if you're doing a fireplace, those need to be in as well. So, so there are different ways. So you just need to find out from the building department how they do it. And then in the city of Chicago, you order your inspections online. You don't call it in. So typically what happens is they'll tell you, okay, pick your date. So ideally I recommend pick at least 3 weeks out, that you have your schedule with your guys, have us, pick it out and pick that date. You may or may not get that date, but at least, you have that schedule. Because if not, if you wait until the framing's done and then you order the inspection, you're waiting 3 weeks. At the framing time, it's not too bad, but let's say you're doing your electrical, which is the last trade usually that you're doing that needs an inspection, and you're waiting 3 weeks, you can't move forward with the house until you get that inspection. So that's why we recommend that you do it, order it ahead of time, and then, keep on the electrical contractor and say, here's our deadline, we need to get this done, I'm not reordering this inspection. Because if you have to reschedule again, it's another 2 to 3 weeks.
Yeah, it's so important in the city of Chicago to order your inspections early. Again, that's where we see the difference between getting a house built in 6 months and 2 years. If you wait until the work is done to order the inspection, that's an extra 2-3 weeks, an extra 2-3 weeks, an extra 2-3 weeks. It all adds up. And we really keep people's feet to the fire. If you're working in any village or the city of Chicago, I'll speak specifically to Chicago first. We didn't mention it in the architect phase. But if you're doing a house in the city of Chicago, we want to make sure that they're self-certified. This is a certain certification that the city gives certain architects that they trust and have done so many jobs. This allows them to get permits, in some cases, 2 to 3 weeks. That might take another architect 6 months or more to get the same permit. So it's super important in the city of Chicago, make sure they're self-certified and that they're working with an expediter. One of our architects we work with, his wife works in the permitting department, so he gets permits very quickly. But so sometimes that's part of Chicago. And then in the suburbs, you're going to want an architect that is familiar with the city again, so that way they know how to submit it, so you get your permit approved. Because I've seen it time and time again, where somebody owns a house and the house needs to be knocked down and it's still sitting there because they weren't working with an architect that understood the city and the permit process, and that will cost you not only financially, but the timelines will be way drawn out.
Yeah, if the city kicks back the plan and says, oh, we need to show this, we need to show that, each time it's like, then you get the plan, you take it back to the architect, then they submit it, and then the city takes a week or 2 to review it, and then, so if there's like this multiple kickbacks, you could be waiting 2 months extra just from those delays. So once you've done these inspections, then you go ahead and do the installation, and most cities require an insulation inspection. It's separate from the fire stop, and then once you pass the installation inspection, go ahead and hang your drywall. And it's at that point that the house begins to start looking more like what you envisioned or you were hoping for, because up to that, before then, it may not look like what you thought it was going to look like. But this is the point where you start seeing the fruit of your labors and the fruit of what you want and your vision coming to life.
Yeah, so here you can see the insulation on, this is for a roof, and that actually, again, if you're doing, in this case, it's 2 different insulation groups that come out. We do the roofing separate from the walls. So if you want to explain, Juan, the difference between that.
Okay, so here we did what's called spray foam insulation. There are 2 different types. There's closed cell and open cell. In this particular case, we did the closed cell. This was for a roof of a flat top house in Chicago that we were also putting a rooftop deck on there. So at this point, you don't see the sprinkler system, but this house had the sprinkler system installed. But that is the closed cell, and so closed cell does not allow air or moisture to go through it. There's the open cell does allow air and moisture to go through it. So the thickness. So example, if you have 2x4 walls, you can get what the city requires for insulation value of R4. Most of them require R19 now. So you can get that with the with 2x4 walls with the closed cell. With bats or with open cell, depending on the manufacturer of the open cell, you can't get that R19. So that's why a lot of villages have you build with 2x6 walls instead of 2x4 walls. It's not for structural strength or any of that. It has to do with insulation and energy. So anyway, so that's one way. So the closed cell insulation is the most expensive. Open cell then is the secondary, then cheaper, but then once you get into the bats or the blown in, that's a little cheaper. So, so there's different types of insulation. Obviously, talk to an insulation contractor for more info on that.
And here you can see drywall that's been hung. I recommend if you have a pitched roof, if we didn't do vaulted ceilings with this home, the second floor would only have 8-foot ceilings, but yet you go into this room and it's amazing the way that it looks. It looks more open, more luxurious, more custom. It doesn't cost much more money to do this on your second floor. You just have to plan for it. So I highly recommend it. And then what's nice about it is you're just using the standard 8 feet, but then you get that extra openness, which is just an amazing feeling. So again, that's something you do early on in the process with the architect. Plan for it. If you have a pitched roof, I always recommend vaulting.
Yeah, because sometimes you have height restrictions, and so you may not be able to get the height on the second, let's say you want to do 10 or 11 foot ceilings on the first floor, and there's a restriction on the height of the house. You can only go up so high, 35 feet. That's pretty standard. You may not be able to get more than 8 foot ceilings, or on the second floor. So that's where this comes in, and you can do this. You can do the tray ceilings, and that kind of offsets that, and the cost isn't that much more.
So priming the walls is very important as well. It actually gives an extra protection to the drywall. Before drywall is primed, it's easier to dent if somebody leans on the drywall. So the prime, it gives just a little bit more extra strength to the drywall, so then that way you have smoother walls. So you want to prime those walls and closets.
And then at that point, the order that we go typically, different builders do it different ways, but is we go ahead and tile our bathrooms and our floors. So anywhere we have tile, we bring the tile guy in, other than the backsplash. And then from there, while that is happening, we bring in our hardwood floors and get them delivered. If you're doing pre-finished or unfinished, we bring them in at that time because you want the hardwood floors to acclimate to the wood that's in the house and to the environment of the house. So that way you don't have a lot of issues of buckling and shrinking and all that stuff. So you also want to make sure that if it's in the middle of summer that you're doing this and it's 95 degrees outside and 100% humidity, and you want to have your AC going in the house and have it be at about 72 like it would be as if you were living in the house. So that way there's not that much of a change, and as well as in the winter as well. So you want it to acclimate as much as possible. We recommend a minimum of 7 days, but it may be upwards of 2 weeks. And the wider wood you use, like if you do a 5-inch plank or a 6-inch plank, you want to leave that, you want it to acclimate a little bit longer. And then you don't want it all stacked in one corner of the house. You want to make sure that the wood can breathe, so you want to have it spread out. You don't want to have these big stacks of wood because the wood in the middle can't acclimate. So you want to spread it out so it has time to acclimate.
Yeah, a lot of times we've seen, if you've ever gone into a house and you see wavy floors, that's more than likely they installed it during cold months, and then once it got hot, it expanded, and now you've got these wavy floors. Or where you see shrunk, you see it both ways, and that's because they did not allow that hardwood to acclimate.
And then at this point, you can measure the shower glass as well once the tiles are in, and for any doors and that kind of thing. One thing we recommend, this is something that we do for our houses and our shower pans, is so for the curb for the shower, we actually don't put tile on the top. What we do is we have our countertop company come in and they measure, and we put in quartz there, and as well as the seat, because what happens is tile over time flexes, even though you do everything right, so it'll crack, the grout may crack and all that. So then you put like countertop material actually on the curb, and then it also gives you a smoother surface for the glass to seal when it's closed for the shower. So that's just something that we recommend. It looks nicer, and then just gives you a better long-term product that will last a lot longer than tile would, because that's a high, those are points where you can develop a lot of leaks in the shower.
And then this is where the permanent stairs go in. We didn't talk about it earlier, but many times you're going to have temporary stairs installed during the construction process. This is where the permanent stairs come in. One recommendation I recommend is scheduling your stair guy as far out as possible. Very good stair people cannot just drop what they're doing and be there next week. Very good stair people we found are 3 months out. So they need to be scheduled. That's where keeping a calendar is so important in this. If you're not keeping a good calendar, just stairs can delay your entire house by, again, 3 months or more if you're using a very, very good custom staircase contractor.
And then this is up to you, but you can stain and finish the floors at this time, and that would include the stairs. Do it all at the same time, so the stain color match. If you want it to match, you know, some people may like the stairs to be one stain or one color, and the hardwood floors to be another. But if you want them to match, it's best to do them all at the same time. But when you do that, you have to cover them, protect them as much as possible. And it's the same concept as if you do pre-finished floors, pre-finished hardwood, and you would install them, you know, before the trim guys. So it's the same concept. The nice thing about this is there's no chance then that the floor guys are going to come in and nick up your cabinets after they're installed and that kind of thing. So that's why we like to do it this way. But you know, some people wait until the cabinets are in to then finish the floors.
You have the option to stain and finish the floors at this time. Typically we're doing several coats during the process, but if you stain and finish, we're still going to do another final coat. But once you stain and finish the floors, you want to make sure you get those covered so it protects the floors, because contractors are going to be walking in and out. You're doing the construction in the wintertime, they're going to have, you know, snow on their boots and that sort of thing. You want to make sure that these floors are covered.
All right, so at that point you want to go ahead and install your kitchen cabinets, vanities, you have a wet bar, and then have your countertop contractor come out and measure the countertops. You know, and one thing we didn't mention is when the drywall goes up, have your final measurements for the cabinets. We initially do the initial measurement, and then what the actual measurements are once the drywall is up, then you want to go ahead and do that and have your, if you're getting custom cabinets made and that kind of thing, you want them to come out after the drywall's up. The only issue with that might be if it's a custom cabinet company that takes anywhere from six weeks to 3 months to build your cabinets. You know, you may, if you wait till the drywall is done, then you may have issues there with the stuff getting delivered to finish the job on time. So, but once those are in, measure your countertops and then have them installed as quick as possible. And then at that point, you can have your tile guy come back and install the tile, backsplash, wherever you're going to put that. You also want to go ahead and do your doors and trim. So you want to do your cabinets, vanities, and all that first, your doors second, and then the trim will be last, because all that's kind of dependent, like, you know, where your cabinets go and the trim stops, you know, you can't put the trim in until then. And then again, at this point, so once you've got all the trim and doors in, and you've got your, what we call your base trim in, then you would bring your hardwood floor guy in if you wanted to wait until everything's installed, and then they would come in at that point and then sand and finish and seal the hardwood floors. So that's the other option. And then with that, then you have to bring your trim guy back, and then they have to put in the shoe, and then until the shoe's in, then you can bring your painter. So that's the reason why we do it the way we do it, is because then we avoid 2 extra steps in the process and potential delays on the job when you do it this way.
And then of course you're going to have your shower glass installers come at this point. This is one of the final things you do in the construction process. It's, you know, they're quick, just a day.
All right, so you want to go ahead and get the house painted. The first thing that they should be doing is caulking all the trim throughout the house. Make sure they sand it properly. You know, you want that nice smooth finish. So there's 2 different ways typically that people paint with the latex paint now. Is you could either do the brush or you do the spray. For the trim, the best thing to get the nicest look is to do the spray, because then it almost looks like the old oil-based paint they used to use where it wouldn't have the paint brushes. So you get the really nice smooth finish on the trim and the doors. So we recommend to do the spray. It's a little bit more money, but it gives you a nicer finish. And then once you've had the house painted, then at that point you can bring in all the other trades that were in there before to do what we call the trim phase. So HVAC, they're going to put in all the ductwork. They're going to, finish out the furnace, install all that, the plumbing. So now this is when the freestanding tub and the freestanding filler for the tub. That's when they come in, and the trim and all the faucets and all that. Electrical. This is where you want all your light fixtures there, and depending on if you're doing a chandelier like this, figure that just prior to that chandelier, if they got to put it together, it's probably a couple days. But usually the electrical goes pretty quick. And then go ahead and install your accessories, your door hardware, and install your closet shelves at this time.
This is where you're going to finish the outside. Any landscaping, you don't want to do landscaping early in on the process, because these contractors, again, all the subs are coming in and out of the house, and you do this great landscaping, and it will get destroyed. You're bringing in heavy equipment. So landscaping is last, and then there's just the little touch-ups inside the house. So you've got, of course, the cabinets. You're going to go through with blue tape. If you're working as a builder, you should be blue taping the house. Anything that needs to be corrected so everyone's on the same page. And then they're going to go ahead and correct those items. Typically, when we're working with our clients, we're blue taping it ourselves, and then our client, before we bring our clients in, and then they're going to blue tape it an additional time, so that way we know that they're happy with the finished product.
Yeah, and then you may be touching up your cabinets, your paint, because people came in again, and most cabinet companies will provide you with, or have at least available touch-up kits, which is usually like a wax, and then a little brush, kind of like it smells like nail polish, but that's what you use for touching up the cabinets. And then if there are inspections that are required, which most cities require, then at that point you order your final inspections. And then for the electrical, they'll come with they'll check the outlets, the GFIs, and all that stuff. So you want to have all that done at that point and have your final inspection. Get the house clean, do a final walkthrough, and call up United Van Lines and have them move your furniture in there. So, and then you enjoy your house.
Did anybody have any questions about the steps? I mean, we covered a lot of information. How long would a sump pump last? Well, I always recommend Zoller as a pump brand. You definitely want to do Zoller brand. I don't get paid by them, but they last. But for just peace of mind, I would say about every 5, 6 years you want to do it. I would do it like 2020, 2025, 2030, 2035. I also recommend getting a backup pump with a battery, because some pumps are only good if you have electricity. And I even take it a step further. I have a generator on my own home, so if the power ever goes out, it's tied right into the natural gas. The natural gas kicks on, no matter what's going on in the neighborhood, the natural gas, never gets shut off. There's always natural gas that I've been aware of where no one's ever been shut off completely from the natural gas, so that then keeps my fridge going, it keeps my AC going. I remember one summer we had a bad storm, and my neighbors couldn't even be in their house because it was unbearable from the heat. I'm still running my air conditioner, my food hasn't spoiled. It's a good investment to have that generator, because even a battery backup, let's say there's a really bad storm, like Juan mentioned, the one that was in November? It wasn't that long ago, but there was a really bad storm.
Before Thanksgiving.
And some homes were without power for 3-4 days, and that battery backup is not going to last that long. You're going to get a few pumps out of it, and then that's gone too. So again, I recommend you're building a brand new house, protect your investment, get a natural gas generator. They're not that expensive, and it's just peace of mind. So you're protecting, especially your basement.
Yeah, and
Oh, absolutely, yeah. This presentation was for new construction, but yeah, generators can be added at any time. And then the generator you want it to automatically kick on when power goes out. So as soon as power goes out to your house, you don't have to be there to manually pull a cord, feed it gas. These natural gas generators will automatically kick on, so your house continues to be protected, and your family can live comfortably in the home.
and if you have a, if you wonder if your sump pump is any good or not, I would recommend to call a licensed and qualified plumbing contractor to come take a look at it, and they can, give you a recommendation if there's something needed there.
So again, I would never recommend going to a hardware store to buy your sump pump, because most of the hardware stores don't have Zoller. Most of the time, plumbers, and if the plumber's not installing Zoller, get a new plumber. Yeah, that's a great point. So now many cities, regardless, are requiring passive radon mitigation systems to be installed, regardless. And then there's active systems. But most new construction at this point, it hasn't been implemented yet, but it's a good idea to go ahead and install that system.
Like Wheaton requires it. Yeah, so the architect has to include it, and it is a passive system, and it's part of the plumbing inspection. So the plumbing inspector will come and say, okay, you need to put the radon in here. So yeah. So more and more villages and cities are going there. Not everyone. Chicago doesn't require it, but regardless, just put it in. It's easier to do it now than pay $1,500 later to put something in, and then it looks ugly because it's on the side of the house.
And then they can't incorporate it into the drywall. It's on the outside of the drywall. So yeah, when you're doing new construction, just go ahead and do it right off the beginning.